Okay, this is my Griswold Christmas. And you remember the Griswolds? It was Chevy Chase, Christmas Vacation. And it was a comedy. I'm wearing my Harley Davidson hat. And, the most famous motorcycle movie perhaps of all time was Easy Rider. And, a lot of different kinds of music. Born to be Wild by Steppenwolf. I'm trying to stay away from anything to do with the long-running, undeniably long-running story about internet commentator David Wilcock and friends. But I have to dive into it because everyone needs to have a commentator commentate on the commentator. And Wilcock is very good at commentating about what's going on with the elite people of the planet, because that's all he talks about these days is what's going on with like QAnon. And he seems to have really forgotten about everyone else. In other words, he's become mainstream news redux. It's all about Trump, Biden, the Democrats, the Republicans, U.S. politics. And he used to be about what was going on with the population of humans at this time. And the population of humans at this time, we were supposed to be ascending into higher consciousness, and he did a lot of work on that. But he is really excluding all of that so he can focus on WikiLeaks and QAnon. I went and I looked at some of the WikiLeaks stuff that was newly available, and there was nothing of any interest to anyone there. And as far as QAnon goes, this is just another non-story. It's about as non-story as everything else. And why does Wilcock cover it? Because he's being paid to cover it. He is not an independent person. He has got enormous books published by a division of Bertelsmann, a huge German conglomerate. I think it's Penguin Books, but it's all Bertelsmann, an enormous corporation. And Wilcock goes on about this taking down of, the dark or whatever, and he is doing all of this, and he is being paid by Bertelsmann, his publisher. He is not independent. And, he gets a lot of followers because he's got a lot of publicity. And it's a great diversion because if you spend a lot of time listening to, I took a sample. I didn't listen to his whole 2.5 hours. It doesn't do anything for you, and he's not covering what's really going on among the general population. He is totally focused on the so-called elites, and Harvey Weinstein, the Hollywood celebrity, was carrying this book into the courtroom, and it was a signal to the world that he was going to this is the kind of stuff he's into. Like, seriously? If Harvey Weinstein was really concerned about the courts of law, do you think he'd be carrying a book that's signaling to the population that he's going to do something? Wilcock said he was carrying a book of that had the name of someone who talked a lot about communists when there was the big communist scare in Hollywood. I don't know, maybe it was the 1950s. No, if you're really facing prison, the last thing you're worried about is people on television or David Wilcock saying, "Oh, he's signaling to us something or other." Why would he? If he was really in trouble with the law, he's going to be focused on getting his ass out of jail. And it's not going to be like, I want, the media to know or somebody like Wilcock to pick up on this. It's the last thing you're going to be doing. So, I don't know where the video is of this Weinstein going into court carrying this book. Number one, if he is carrying this book, then what we are looking at is a made for TV event. It is not a real trial of Harvey Weinstein. It is a made for TV event. And if they find a video of him walking into the courtroom and he doesn't have this book, it's more likely it was a real trial. But Wilcock said he had this book, so I'm going to call it and say it's a made for TV event. And no one is going to jail. It is all phony baloney to keep you entertained. What is the point of having this? Celebrities simply want to remain celebrities. They still want to be worshipped as being celebrities. The whole thing about television is celebrity worship. So this enormous game is phony baloney. It's to get people's attention. What really should be going on amongst the people is saying, I don't want any more to do with all of you elite people, you Hollywood celebrities. I don't want to watch your stupid rerun movies. I don't want to hear about the Kardashians. I don't want to hear about the great political theater. What I want is nothing from you at all. In other words, why don't you all go away? And then everyone can go within, as I say in all my videos, go within your heart and figure it out. What is your soul wanting you to do? And your soul is not wanting you to watch television all the time. I saw one video that came across my feed today. It was a rancher from Texas, a big strapping man. He looked the size of what do you call a male cow, a bull. He looked like a bull. He was enormous. And he said with the quarantine on that the meat packing plants can't open and process an enormous quantity of beef cattle. And he talked about how farmers are dumping an enormous number of gallons of milk. So you have an enormous waste of food. What do these farmers need? They need workers to help get the food to storage places, to get processed, to get made into other kinds of foods, spaghetti sauces and things. And there's no one going to these food plants because they're in quarantine. Mainstream news is not talking about this, but this rancher is saying, if we don't get all of the rest of you off your asses back to work, we're going to have a food crisis. So what's more important? A food crisis later or an endless quarantine now? Now, this rancher made a very good appeal, but he didn't do it right in the end because he said, you need to sign petitions and call your governments. No, because these are the people who are never going to listen to you. I know, because I've already written the politicians and they don't respond. So it's time for us to dump our governmental structures because they don't work for us. God knows who they work for, but between the mass media and the government, they're not helping. And all they do is they keep telling you, oh, you got to stay home, you got to stay home. And the farmers are saying, you all stay home and we're going to starve next winter. Who are you going to believe? The government, the media, or the farmer? And you put it all together. If there's no one leaving their house because of quarantine, then the farmer's right. There's nothing being processed for food. So maybe you're worried about catching COVID-19 if you go back to work. But I'd be more worried about everyone starving next winter when there's no food. So what do we all need to do? It seems like there's really nothing I can do. I don't live in America. I don't live in Texas. So I can't volunteer because the border is closed. I can't volunteer to go to a Texas meatpacking plant and say, put me to work. I can't go to an American dairy farm and say, how can I help? It's not easy to tell anyone that, I'm sitting here twiddling my thumbs, and even if you take the quarantine off, I'm not going to be much use. The only use I have is my voice, and I speak, and then I look at the number of people who view me, and I say, it's not really going to help any, is it? Anyways, I talk because that's all I can tell you. And the rest of you are pretty much the same. Someone says maybe you need to pray for a miracle. I'm sure in centuries past, when humans were facing famine, like in Ireland, or they were facing the plague, or they were facing an enormous war, I'm sure they all prayed for miracles. History says miracles never came. Okay, I'm Bob Frizzell for The Reality Game, and that other guy, Harley Davidson guy, is not me. I'm a different personality, and I'm going to tell you what I think's going to happen. Pretty much what that guy said. Which guy, the farmer or Hardy? Let's go with both of those guys. We are not going to have a whole pile of meat this upcoming barbecue season in the summer or in the fall. So you can expect that the price of meat is going to go way up. People are going to be looking to see, well, what else is there to eat? And yesterday, I heard on the Canadian Broadcasting Company, CBC, that in the famous Canadian potato growing country of Prince Edward Island, they're not going to plant as many potatoes. They're going to cut back by 15% because people aren't eating potatoes as much as they once did. But those potato farmers should be listening to the American cattle rancher who says there's not going to be any beef. Oh, and they're going to, he said they're euthanizing these cows and euthanizing the chickens. They're not going to a slaughterhouse. They're killing them, but they're not going for food. Seem dumb to you? Well, if there's no one that's going to work in the meat packing industry, then, come and get your dead cow here in North Texas or something. Throw it in the back of your pickup truck and take it to your backyard and see what you can do with it. But, if you were a farmer in Prince Edward Island and you heard that story that there weren't going to be as much meat, are you going to say, well, people eat meat and potatoes? If they're not eating meat, then they're eating potatoes. Or might you say, well, if there's no meat, people are just going to eat more potatoes? I would go with that one and plant even more potatoes this year. What are the chances that there's a rancher from North Texas that's going to watch what I have to say? Or there's a potato farmer from Prince Edward Island that's going to be watching what I have to say? Zilch. Does it seem like humans, even us bright ones, are condemned by the fact that we can't talk to the right people? I'm supposed to just phone some random number in Prince Edward Island and say, this is what I heard from this Texas guy. Click.